valuable source. The cautious Lee provides no documents, but his tip-offs allow other Soviet agents working within the OSS to evade detection.
The Soviet Union was actually far more successful in gaining intelligence on its allies than it ever was against its enemies. And because its operations against its allies, Britain and the United States, were on so much a larger scale than its operations against its enemies, it was convinced for much of the war that its allies must be engaged in equally large operations against it.
There is more than a grain of truth to that suspicion. Many American and British officials believe Russia will become the next big enemy after Hitler is defeated. They withhold from the Soviets the secret date of D-Day. If Russian generals know when the Second Front is to open, they might make their own plans to put a stranglehold on Nazi territories in Eastern Europe. But according to the KGB archives, Duncan Lee gave his Soviet contacts top secret details about D-Day. A note citing Lee as its source is found in his KGB file. It is dated March 3, 1944, and reads, "The Second Front will be opened between mid-May and the beginning of June." If they believed Lee's information, the Russians were now privy to the most important secret of the war. By 1944, Lee believes that he is losing his cover and suspects that American counter-espionage agents are closing in on him.
He got scared to death because he, as an American operative, he realized that all of Soviet sources inside American government organizations, sooner or later, would be discovered.
As the war draws to a close, many of those who worked for the Soviets in the 30s and early 40s now regret their actions. Lee is among them. He is haunted by the implications of his wartime contact with the Soviets. He severs all ties with Russian agents. In 1948, his worst fears are realized when he is identified along with Alger Hiss and Duggan as a suspected Soviet agent. Investigated by the FBI, he is never charged with any crime, in part because the investigations had no access to the evidence recorded in the Venona files. He is one of a number of OSS officials who provided information to Russia, but who escape indictment for exactly this reason. One of Joseph Stalin's highest priorities during World War II is achieving military parity with the United States. He realizes the fastest and easiest way to do this is by stealing the necessary technologies from America.
America was a perfect place to steal military technologies. They were stealing everything from planes and tanks and ships to elevators in houses and even lipstick. They needed lipstick, so they stole it in America.
The most important single secret that Soviet spies smuggle out of the U.S. are designs for an atomic bomb. But Stalin is not easily convinced that he has gained anything of value.
Stalin was one of the most suspicious men ever to lead any major power in the 20th century. So that, even when he'd got the most remarkable secrets from another country, he always thought, am I being fooled? And it took him 4 years to realize that he'd really been given the plans of the atomic bomb.
In the spring of 1949, Igor Kurchatov, the leading Soviet scientist in charge of the Russian atomic bomb project, actually takes plutonium sealed in a football-shaped casing to a meeting and hands the casing to Stalin.
Stalin said, how do I know? Convince me. How do I know that this really is a nuclear charge? And then Kurchatov says, if it was simply a lump of sparkling metal, it would be cold. But it's warm, isn't it? Why is it warm? Because the alpha disintegration has begun. And a few months later, that American football containing a plutonium charge was successfully tested at the Kazakhstan test site. So in September 1949, the nuclear age came of age. Both sides had it, but they both had American weapons.
Some of the atomic secrets are stolen by a Los Alamos machinist recruited by Julius Rosenberg, who runs a Soviet spy ring. Rosenberg and his wife Ethel are executed for atomic espionage in 1953.
It's tragically ironic that Julius Rosenberg should have been executed for one of his sidelines. What we now know is that the Rosenbergs, Julius Rosenberg, with some help from his wife Ethel, was running one of the biggest scientific and technological espionage networks in the history of the United States.
One of the key links to the illegal transfer of American technology to the Soviets is William Pearl, who is also a member of the Rosenberg spy ring. In the mid-1930s, Pearl joins a branch of the Young Communist League while a student at the City College of New York. After earning his engineering degree, Pearl goes to work for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, where he helps design streamlined aircraft bodies and revolutionary new propulsion systems for a futuristic new class of aircraft called jets. By then, he is also a...
He was one of the principal architects of jet engines, and the prototype for the MiGs that were used by the Russians to fight in Korea during the Korean War were the designs given to them by William Pearl.
On June 25, 1950, North Korea attacks South Korea. One of their most effective weapons is the Russian MiG-15, the Soviet Union's first jet fighter. The American-dominated United Nations forces engage the MiGs with propeller-driven fighters, but the MiGs are far superior, and the UN forces suffer heavy losses. Only when the U.S. Air Force begins deploying the Sabre, America's first jet fighter, does the balance of power shift in its favor. It will be decades before the world learns the ironic truth. The West was almost beaten by its own stolen technology. As a result, the war in Korea ends in a stalemate, in part thanks to William Pearl.
What I think hasn't been realized until quite recently is that the first American atomic bomb is not the only thing, far from the only thing, in American weaponry that the KGB is providing the material to copy. Jet engine is another. Soviet armed forces after the Second World War would not have been in the big league had it not been for American technology. And they depended throughout the Cold War even more on American technology than they did on Soviet technology.
It is 1960, and William Pearl's treasonous activities blow up on the world scene on May 1st. While flying at 60,000 feet over the Soviet Union in a U-2 spy plane, Air Force Captain Francis Gary Powers is shot down. Powers is captured and imprisoned, a major propaganda coup for the Soviets. But how was Powers' U-2 detected? With American-issue technology, radar. The radar used to spot and target Powers' plane is based on plans stolen by Pearl and passed to Russia through the Rosenberg spy ring.
If you just take atomic espionage and put together all the data they got from their collective spies, of which we now know there were certainly a good many, this enabled them to make progress years ahead of time.
The files of the KGB reveal that the Soviet Union had indeed penetrated to the very heart of America's most hallowed institutions. The knowledge they gleaned and the technology that was stolen reshaped the world for most of the 20th century. To ex-KGB agent Alexander Vasilyev, the revelations in the files of the KGB offer human as well as historical insights.
For me personally, it was important why they did it and how. From the professional point of view, how. And from the moral point of view, why. The tragedy of these people is that they did what they did in the 30s and the 40s, but they were judged and condemned in the 50s, 60s, 70s. These were absolutely different situations, absolutely different climate in America. And I'm sure they wouldn't do that in the 50s, what they did in the 30s. They were not working against America. No one asked them to work against America.
One of the most intriguing unanswered questions is how the publication of the KGB files and the historical insights they offer will play in the former Soviet Union.
I'm hoping that they will not view the new revelations here, that some of which, many of which perhaps they would have preferred not to have come out. I'm hoping that they see that in the context of what happens when a country deals honestly with its own past. No country has a future until it can deal honestly with its past.
The KGB files reveal a history of Russian spies that is much larger and more complex than previously suspected. But the files also show that the great heyday of Soviet espionage in America had faded years before the Red Scare created a period of national paranoia. The revelations from the KGB archives are a bracing reminder that our familiar world, the shared past we thought we knew, is not fixed and unchanging. History, the KGB files remind us, may be as full of surprises and potential change as the future.